about it is, thinking back, that Jimmy could not only sing, he could sing and play at the same time. Now, there's not many guitar players that can do that. B.B. King can play the guitar, but when he sings, he stops playing the guitar. There's many, many guitar players actually physically stop playing the guitar while they're singing. Now, Jimmy could sing and play at the same time, and that is unique. You don't see that very often.
In April 1968, work began in earnest at the record plant in New York on what became the Electric Ladyland album. But due to differences within the band, it wasn't completed until late August.
Jimmy started to really get adventurous and he wanted to do more stuff. He was talking in interviews about playing with other musicians, not even continuing to play with the Experience exclusively. He wasn't saying he was going to break up the Experience. So his line at the time was, well, there's no reason for us only to play together. Chaz Chandler quit during the making of Electric Ladyland because he was so frustrated with Jimmy's experimentation in the studio and playing with so many different people and this complete disorganization. And what's interesting is the track that he actually quit, that was the last straw, was Gypsy Eyes, a song that's probably my favorite song of all time of Hendrix's because it's so inventive. Because Jimmy recorded the song like 50 times or something.
He was the first person that I worked with that used the amplifier as part of the sound, but in a big way. I mean, you know, a lot of musicians now will go up and put the feedback and use the guitar. But he was an innovator with that. He used that and learned to use that and control that to become an integral part of everything that he did. It would not be uncommon for manufacturers to come by with a wah-wah pedal or a cue box or a fuzz tone, and he'd be the first guy to put not one of those, but put 2 or 3 of those things in series and try to see what he can come up with. So he was very sound-oriented. You know, he would look to the guitar, to the amplifier, and to the studio to create the Jimi Hendrix sound. So he used all of those things, as opposed to, well, there's the guitar and here's the microphone and here's the control room. So the guitar player normally would sit out there and that with that. But he understood what could happen in here. He understood what the capabilities of the instrument were and the amplifiers. And we would blow up, I don't know, Marshall amplifiers. I don't remember, we must have blown, I remember 2 or 3 within the span of 2 weeks, and we just blew them right up because it was so loud. And that was part of his sound. He would create a lot of those things right on the spot. It wasn't planned. You know, he didn't say, I think I'm going to go and do this. He would go in there, and for hours, and the tape would be running, and he'd come back in and say, let me hear what that sounds like. Because in the control room, you could turn it down, and the hardcore reality was there, well, there's that little speaker. And he would listen and understood, well, if I do that, okay, then he'd go out and try something else. So he was a great experimenter with sounds.
In the summer of 1969, Hendrix broke up the Experience and reunited with old army buddy Billy Cox on bass and with Mitch on drums. And the newly named Gypsy Sons and Rainbows Band headlined the Woodstock Festival in New York. In December, Jimmy began 2 nights of shows at the Fillmore East Club in New York, replacing Mitch with drummer Buddy Miles. The shows were recorded for the Band of Gypsys album.
It had inauspicious beginnings because the album happened in the first place because of a lawsuit with Ed Chalpin. Jimmy had signed contracts when he was a studio musician to satisfy and to try to take care of those legal responsibilities to Ed Chalpin. They gave a record to him and to Capitol Records from a live show. They specifically organized these 4 live shows at the Fillmore East, New Year's Eve, 69, 70, and recorded those shows and put out Band of Gypsys. The funny thing is, for many people, that's their favorite Hendrix album of all time, which for him was the most, you know, thrown together, offhanded record. But that's part of why Band of Gypsys is such an incredible record. It's very live. It also it shows the beginning. It's the beginning of the last stage of Jimmy's career as an artist, as a creative artist. The music is very different. Billy Cox is in the band now. And as soon as Billy joined the band, the music itself changed tremendously.
what Billy brought to the band, with Noel stepping out for a while, was he, I believe, was a more accomplished and more soulful bass guitar player. I've already given credit to Noel for what he brought to the band, but Billy was funky. Billy had already played in heavy rhythm and blues bands around, and he knew exactly what it took. He wrote some great bass lines to new songs by Jimmy, and they lost a little bit of the twee psychedelia that they had originally formed with in London, and they just got rootsier and funkier, and you know, it was probably out of necessity. They were, you know, hanging out with the Black Panthers by that point and stuff, and you know, playing gigs in Harlem and things like that. So I think they just got rootsier, and Billy helped that process.
So in that last phase of 1970, following the breakup of the band the Gypsys, and then once you get into the spring of 70, Jimmy started to record again, primarily with Mitch and with Billy, and was writing all of these songs that were following that same strain that he had started with Band of Gypsys, these bassline-oriented songs. And some of the great examples of that are Dolly Dagger. Dolly Dagger is a fantastic song, very heavy with the bass lines.
Sadly, Jimi Hendrix's brief career ended on the 18th of September 1970. He was only 27 years old.
Angel is a very spiritual song for me because it almost foretold his passing on, you know? Remember, Angel didn't come out until after Jimmy was dead. But when I heard it, I mean, I cried and cried because he said that he's leaving. He almost told me, he said, you know, I'm leaving now. You know, I gotta go, you know.
He died because, well, he would drink beer and just whatever, and he took sleeping pills. And this one night, he was in London. He had to come back to New York for whatever, and then I was supposed to work with him. And he went to sleep, and he got sick, and he vomited, and he choked on his own vomit. So he did not die from a drug overdose. I know the difference between drugs, and he did too, and he knew the difference between that and a sleeping pill, because Jimmy, you kept his hours and went to the studio at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you know, to go to bed at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and that screws up everything, especially there's a 6-hour difference between London and New York, and it wears on you, especially keeping those hours. And that's what he did, and that's how he died. And I remember that because I remember we were supposed to be working on something that was done from one of the older sessions, which required record plant to be involved, and I was there, and he never showed up.
When I heard Jimmy had died, it was incredible. I happened to be, I was living in Long Island, New York at the time, and I had a band called Boomerang. And I was in the shower getting ready to actually go to Electric Ladyland, Jimmy's studio.